Brilliant. Good morning.
Good morning.
Tough crowd. We'll work on that. Okay. I'm Ed Davis. I'm the Policy Director here at the Centre for Social Justice. If you've not been here before, a big welcome. We've only been in this building for about 6 months, but it is our new home. We hope to be here for a long time, so feel this is your home too. A bit of housekeeping before we start. If you need the lavatory, head to the back, go left. There's a complicated button system. Good luck. Fire alarm. In a break from the norm, we are actually going to have a fire alarm this morning. So it's going to go off at about 11:30, which is about when we're meant to be leaving here anyway. So if it goes off, you should get out. Whether or not it's a test, if you hear it, it's time to leave. Thank you for coming. So reducing violent crime in London is something the CSJ has long worked on and is very passionate about. For 15 years, it's a conversation we've been trying to speak into. And I thought I would kick off this morning with a case study from one of our papers, which I will just read to you. So Warren was 20. He grew up in a single-parent family. His mother worked long hours, and he would go for days without seeing her due to the shift hours she worked. He attended a failing school, and in year 9, when a new head teacher arrived to improve it, he was excluded, along with about 20 other kids in his year. It took 3 months before he was placed in a pupil referral unit, during which he hung around on the streets. Attendance at PRU was just half a day for 3 days a week, so he continued spending large amounts of time on the streets. By year 10, he'd been moved again to a special school for boys with behavioural, emotional and social difficulties. He describes the school as just housing kids. He was given year 7 and 8 level worksheets, because they just assume they're not clever, he says, and the focus is on controlling the pupils rather than teaching them. He was not entered for any GCSEs. He returned to the streets and he was arrested for possession and intent to supply, ended up in a young offenders institute. This is normal life for us. You sell drugs and everyone has to survive. The really shocking thing about that is it is just not shocking. This is from our Dying to Belong report, which we wrote 10 years ago. What's changed? This could have been written yesterday. And in fact, our work here carries on this line, and it has done for the last 10 years. So just in the last few months, we published Why Family Matters. Warren spoke about problems at home. Problems at home are the same as they were 10 years ago, and they're not changing. He talked about his time in a PRU. Last year, we published Providing the Alternative, looking at alternative provision, exclusions, pupil referral units, and we've got an ongoing project going for the next 3 years on this, because it's not changing fast enough. And then last year, we also published It Can Be Stopped, and this was 10 years on from Dying to Belong. We thought we needed to revisit this, because it's not changing fast enough. All these cases, the same problems, the same issues coming up time and time again for 10 years. So it's great that we publish these reports, and they are brilliant reports, and obviously I'd say that. But actually, we need people now who are going to make some change, which is why it's great to have you lot here. Many of you, I know, work in this area and are making change. It's why it's great to have Shaun here this morning to talk about what he'd like to do in this area. Shaun is an old friend of the CSJ. It's interesting, our theory of change here is that we work with frontline charities to understand what's going on, and then we try and translate it into politics to see what politicians can do. And Shaun has basically lived that. So the last time Shaun was here, he was speaking at our Alliance conference, which speaks to small charities some years ago, and now he's coming back in a political capacity. So he's actually lived the whole theory of the CSJ, which is why it's very exciting to have you here, Shaun. And I doubt the television crews are here for me, so I will hand over now, and it'd be great to hear from you. And at the end, we'll have a bit of time for Q&A as well, so be listening hard and be thinking what you'd like to ask Shaun.
First of all, good morning all. Thank you for turning out. It's really nice to see such a turnout, and thank you to the CSJ for having me. I consider the CSJ the thinking part of my evolution. I come from a youth work background, and I started youth work just because I was one of those youths. It wasn't some big sort of glorious vision I had for changing my community. It's just that I grew up those boys, came back from university and seen that 2 of my friends had been murdered, and umpteen different people had joined gangs, and stabbings and the like were just the norm. So that was my emotional piece for getting involved. I realised that because I shared some experience with these boys, nearly all of it, but also had another experience, I could offer something different to my communities, particularly that part of my community. That's why I'm using the term boy. As I grew up and the charity I ran and the work I did evolved, I then worked with the whole community, from young girls right up to single parents and everybody in between. And that's the driver for me. So this morning, when I speak to you, this is the entire reason I've bothered with politics at all. I actually think party politics is a little bit rubbish. The whole Punch and Judy thing, arguing about, it just does not interest me. I'm not interested in that. What I am interested in is strengthening communities. What I am interested in is the independence of communities. Some of the political debate, in fact, no, let me move it. Most of the political debate around crime, its causes, is for the convenience of politicians. Drumming up a report that has convenient conclusions for your politics doesn't solve anybody's problems. It just means you can dodge the responsibility that you've been given to deal with it again. I cannot tell you how infuriating that is for me. I spoke to a lady who'd lost 2 of her sons. Not 1, 2. And the word she said to me had nothing to do with politics. She asked why no one had come to see her. She had real learnings for people to understand that will make a difference to other people so they don't lose their sons. She used the words, I came to this country from a war zone where my family survived. They're in London and both of them died. We came here to be safe. She asked me the question, what is going on? I come from a background where we had all the risk factors, all of it, the root causes of crime. So we had poverty, we had trauma, we had domestic violence, we had fatherlessness, which is different to single parenthood. Fatherlessness, we had the whole gambit. Gangs, individual criminals. The professional term is a risky environment. I spent all of my time trying to understand how I survived a risky environment, but many of my contemporaries didn't. So when I speak to you today, this is entirely about survival. When I speak to you today about crime, understand in London in 2019, crime is a social mobility issue. When you talk about the root causes, what you're looking at is the amount of things that stop you progressing. You can be an absolute genius and never make it off your road if you have to spend every day dodging your local gang. Think that through for a second. If you come from a nice middle class background, somebody will find you and they'll make use of your genius. If you come from Ladbroke Grove, where I came from, Tottenham, the middle of Tottenham, Hackney, places like that, you might not find that person. So when I tell to you the world doesn't need another lawyer, but it does need many more youth workers, I think you'll agree. And the point I want to make, this goes beyond politics. So I'm prepared to take the government on. When we talk about the cuts we made, what happened, let's talk about where they came from and why they were necessary. I remember, for those of you who don't know, I used to be special advisor to the PM. That was David Cameron. And we spent long hours of me pointing out to him some of the effects that this might have. And he said, but Shaun, I'm in a position where I have to do for the whole country. And that's why when you fast forward to today and people say to you, throw money at it, they're wrong. It isn't just money. It's about how do you make robust, self-determined communities? How do you demonstrate to young people that their actions have meaning? How do you empower the poorest communities? The simplistic conversations we're having about the impact of poverty or domestic violence are meaning that politicians are able to get away with taking responsibility. Unfortunately for me, I have horrible personal experience of what it's like to have poverty as your companion. I get that, but let's be clear, most poor people have no relationship with crime other than the fact they're a victim. Most poor people spend their whole time trying to make ends meet. And I say that to you so that people can't hide behind some of the concepts we've thrown out there that answer for them why there is more crime and it's growing. To be clear, crime in London is significantly worse than it was 10 years ago. Significantly worse. When you speak to young people, they will tell you they're afraid. I grew up with enough of the boys that you'd cross the street for to understand the change. The boys I grew up with are now adults. When they tell me they're afraid, we all need to worry. So that's why I say to you, in fact, I'm going to leap to the end. I've got a nice ordered speech. It's too late now, forget the speech. I'm on a roll. I'm going to leap to the end what I'm going to do, right? Operation London Ceasefire. It is about gang callings. It is about responsibility. I spoke to a boy a few weeks ago called Robin, who has been through the mill on this. He's been in jail here, he's been in jail Jamaica, he's been stabbed, he has been through it all. And he said something to me that I will always remember. He said, Shaun, we'll never solve this from the top down. Our communities must be involved in solving these issues. So that's why I'm talking about London Ceasefire. If you speak to the police, they can quite easily identify gang membership. They'll tell you that. They'll tell you there's about 250 gangs in London, about 4,500 members. They'll tell you they're responsible for 60% of all injuries by knives. They'll tell you that. They'll identify these individuals for you. So why are we not acting on that? Why are we not backing the police to break the cycle? I go back to the comment I made. You may well be a genius, but if you spend your time dodging one of those 250 gangs, nobody will ever find out. We have to do something about it. So we're going to call those gangs in, and we're going to sit them down, and we're going to read them the Riot Act, but also provide them with a way out. The way a gang works is the people in the centre of that target are red hot, and they're high-grade criminals, and the place for them is probably prison. But around that, there's a number of young people who haven't transgressed beyond saving. They're the people we need to focus on in a very different way. I did a podcast recently, and the lady I was on the podcast with, she does restorative justice. And she reminded me again of how powerful it is. But the key thing that makes restorative justice powerful is that you make the perpetrators take responsibility for their actions. So when you make a community dependent because it suits you politically to say that only you can unlock their talent, you make them vulnerable. When that community has power within its own borders, they change things, and often very quickly. When I was a youth worker, I've been a youth worker now for over 20 years, we used to have a saying, nobody behaves for the council. They don't. I've had a lot of conversations in my time, and at no point has any young person said to me, yeah, but the council leader said. It just doesn't happen. So what we can be doing is building strong family, building stronger communities. Some of that is policy, much of that is culture, and it's where responsibility for those in elected office becomes important. If I say to you, this is a 10-year journey, what I'm saying to young people is, tool up for the next 10 years. Tool up for the next 10 years. Whatever the murder rate is now, times it by 10. If you're a young person who's close to this, you then think, well, hold on a second, am I going to be in those numbers? I'll tool up. We've got to make that intervention. And we've got to make it early. And the first step of that intervention is somebody saying, I will take on the criminals. It's me versus them. Us versus them. I spoke to a man yesterday who'd been burgled. And he said what was really disappointing is that he could sense in the police officer that the police officer's job had changed from being out there, being in his community, to sitting in front of his computer. We have to give back the police the responsibility by backing them to deliver on that. But also we need to go into our communities and back parents so they can prepare their children for the road, not the road for their children. One of the things my mother knew instinctively, she had 2 young boys in the house. As you could see the attractive nature of those older boys around us who are up to no good. When you have very little and somebody's driving a Golf GTI, this is important to you. But my mum intervened with that process by saying to me, look, we will find you something to do. You are responsible for your own outcomes. You've got to give that sense of responsibility. And what you find in the poorest communities is people who are willing to pick it up. So that's a big part of what we do, how we speak about this. Again, we don't tell people there's no responsibility, it will go on for 10 years. We don't blame it all on cuts. We have an £18.5 billion budget in London. use it to keep communities safe. If you're serious, you direct the money in that way. So when I say to you that we're going to do London ceasefire, it's an important policy intervention, but it runs alongside a change in the conversation about how we deal with crime. When I was explaining this yesterday to the young people I was sitting with, I said to them, we need a hard response on one end, the stick if you will, and we need a hopeful response on the other end, the carrot. So when we sit people down, we'll be saying to them, you have a choice. You can access all the extra provision we're about to put your way and move your life on, or you can take us on and end up in jail. One of the things that 20 years of youth experience will tell you, most young people are super sharp. Most young people in these dire situations are actually looking for a way out. It's our duty to provide that way out. All of the root causes, all of the driving factors behind this, school exclusions, how tough it is to parent in London, we can also solve through policy, but right here, right now, it's about the first steps, the actions to back up how do we make the streets safer. The interesting thing about drug dealing and being a criminal, it is a very, very attractive offer. It really, really is. And we have to do something to make it less attractive. When I talk to you about preparing young people for the road, this is what I'm talking about. When I talk about resilience, how do we say to our young people who will be alone in these situations, how do they resist that? That's why you hear me talk about the adult education budget and my fondness for further education colleges, and how I'll be using a portion of that budget as a social mobility tool to make sure that the young people furthest away from employment, the young people furthest away from taking charge of their life, have direct access to the funds they need to move on. It's really important. When I grew up, FE college was the thing that saved me. I never even heard of university until I went to FE college. It was a very maturing moment for me. It was a second chance. There's so many more young people in London now who need that chance. So we've got to provide it. And it goes back to comparing what's going on now. I've read something that says that there have been 280 projects funded across London by the mayor, and that's great, but it's scattergun. It has no formal direction. It has no plan. It is driven by press releases. It means you can send another press release, we funded this, send another press release, we funded that. You can bribe a large number of people. Anybody who does youth work will tell you this. You need to intervene early and often. If anybody you know runs a small charity that's doing the real work around youth work, ask them what they need. They will tell you they don't need equipment. What they need is somebody to pay their light bill and someone to pay salaries. They're long-term interventions. I would swap 280 scattergun projects for the real projects that are in communities doing the work. I would give them the opportunity to do it for longer. I want you to think this through for me. You meet someone who's prepared to throw acid in your face. Do you think that's a summer intervention? Ask yourself that question. Do you think a couple of weeks of me playing table tennis is going to fix that? Or do you think you're going to have a long, drawn-out, tough conversation about that person's entire worldview? That's where we are. That is where we are. And the reason I drop the statistics on you, 4,500 known gang members, in the context of 9 million people, that's a minuscule amount of people. But they're having a massive effect on the future of all of us. All of us. So we've got to target the interventions. There is hundreds of projects across London that are doing the real work to make the real change. I will find them and I will fund them. They will get no less than 3 years funding. That's how you make change. So again, when I say to you, if you're serious about supporting this change, and supporting this change talks about what it is to be a Londoner. London is only as good as its poorest, most suffering community. We must lift everybody up. I could tell you all the hundreds of things that I'm into. London living wage, Let's make that happen. Let's shame the businesses that are not paying that. Let's get it done. I can tell you about my need to involve parents. We need a parent information hub. Most parents now who have teenagers struggle to understand the challenges they're going through. Somebody needs to let that happen. Yesterday I spoke to a boy, he's 21 years old. He said his biggest problem was he had no idea what renting a property was going to look like. He also went to say it's hard for him to move forward because of the culture from which he comes. His parents are separate to that culture. So our young people are battling things that we never had to battle. Our parents are unable to support them because we're not supporting our parents with the correct information. Let's give it to them. It has been a national pastime to give poor careers advice in this country. We seem to indulge ourselves in it for hundreds of years, giving poor careers advice. Let's turn that around. One of the interesting things about running for Mayor of London is that you see the full breadth of London society. So I sat with the CEO of Citibank, and we had a big conversation about the whole big sweep of London, anything from Brexit down to why he feels unsafe when he's walking home. We talked about the whole thing. And what was interesting is I sat in front of him and I thought, if I'd known about your business, I would work for your business. He took me down on the floor and I met the people who do the research. I met some of the dealers and all the rest of that. And I thought, as a young Londoner, if someone had told me I would be working here, that whole world is obscured from me. But why? Why don't we put that right now? Because we're busy arguing about politics, we're busy arguing about the past, we're busy dodging the responsibility to deliver. There are not words to convey how important to me personally this is, and I hope to you personally as well, because we are talking about the future of London. London is not open if your community is dependent and unsafe. London is becoming more than ever before a tale of two towns. We've got to put that right. Anything from supporting parents right up to how to employ our young people. Where do they live? So you'll always get from me fully costed policy. Part of a whole idea to improve London. Not just throwing money at it, not blaming somebody else for it, taking it on. I'm just going to go back to my speech. I'm sure I had some, magnificent end. So what it really is, we speak about London the whole time as a factory. One of our proudest boasts are we're the engine of the UK economy. Clearly that's true. But also London is home. And when you have a home, you need to know your neighbours. You need to know you have a future. You need to know you're safe. So let's get on and do that. And the final thing I'd say, we must give our young people some semblance of the idea that they can have a self-driven, prosperous future. I used to be a member of the Army Cadets. I remember one day an officer saying to me, your personal journey in life will be characterised by self-control, self-belief, and self-motivation. You've got to be able to motivate yourself. So I said to him, sir, what will motivate me? And he said, helping others, pushing people along. I wonder if that's part of our youth culture now. The youth culture I see seems to be very negative. Seems to be very macho. And if you think I'm wrong, I challenge you to look at the social media that your children are involved in, or that young people involved in general. I only say that because I have so many other things I'd like to say to you, but that's the thing that's burning for me. Because yesterday, a young person showed me a video so horrible, I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. It's of another kid attacking somebody else, and how everybody else thought it was funny. So when you read something that says it's the government's fault, ask yourself what that particular politician should be doing with their £18 billion. When you read something that says, let's just throw money at it, remember money doesn't solve everything. Ask yourself what you would do. Ask yourself what your parents would do. Ask yourself what we all should do. Thank you.
before we do, firstly, if anyone from Wandsworth Council is here, I am terrified of you. I think that line about no one's scared of the council is a fascinating one, and it shows, as you say, there are two cities. I know that I'm terrified about including my recycling box, but I know that my kids couldn't care less. I'm going to use sort of chair prerogative to ask the first question as well. You mentioned that you were that boy growing up, and I suppose if you could laser in, what was the thing that meant you are now this man and not that boy?
I think there's a few things. The first thing was my mum. My mum is a Jamaican woman, and in her words, don't mess with me. My mum was very focused on the outcomes for me and my brother, because you could see there were other forces pulling us in a particular direction. And when you come from a West Indian background, there's a natural propensity towards discipline, but my mum also found outlets for me. So she made me a member of the Army Cadets. I did gymnastics for 22 years. She was trying to broaden my horizons. She wanted to make sure that I didn't think our street was the world. And for me, in particular, that was very important. But also, I was given the idea that I should try and that I was responsible. You know, when you come from a poor background, people outside of your community often tell you your outcomes, and my mum said you should try to pick your own outcomes. If you want to be a criminal, fine, but make sure it's a decision you made. And by the way, if you are a criminal, I'll kill you first. So.
Let's open it up a bit. Have we got any questions from the floor? Yes, we've got a microphone.
Hello, I was the person at one stage in my life on the other side. The question is, so our young people are able to get, for want of a better expression, lackluster grades in high school, go on, struggle through college, and then they're provided with a fund to go to university, probably where they're not going to excel, they're not going to get the required grades at the end of it. However, on the flip side of that, if that same 16-year-old walks into a bank with a A-star business plan that everybody can see is going to be a fully functioning, profitable business at the end of it, the bank's going to laugh him out of there. Why is there no scheme set up on a government level that's similar to the university scheme, where you can pay back what you owe over a period of time after you've gained your qualification?
Okay, there's two things I'd say. So as the Mayor of London, you would set that fund up, wouldn't you? I know there's a number of charities and businesses in London that do that. It's about using the office of the Mayor of London to provide that connectivity. So there's they were a charity, they sort of become a business now called Rockstar Mentoring, that do that kind of work, that find young people, not only get them the money, but mentor them through the process. But the problem is, we are not having enough conversations about what it means to be entrepreneurial, not just an entrepreneur, if you see what I'm saying. Entrepreneur to me means you start a business. Entrepreneurial means you train young people to always look for an opportunity wherever they are. But again, that's why it's important, whoever's in charge, what are they focused on? Are they focused on their next step, or are they focused on the people they're meant to be helping? I do that all day long, if only because one of the key things I think saves any poor community is employment. And I make an assumption, but me and you know the realness of it. Yeah, if you see your brethren starting business, you think, well, it's possible. It's possible. Either you start your own, or you work for him or her. Do you see what I mean? But it's how we're talking. We're constantly talking at communities to make us their champion. My role, I would see it as, is to make communities their own champion and make things like that much more possible. And we do have the funds. The Mayor's Fund could do something like that. We are in the biggest business hub in the world. Why are we not getting businesses to do stuff like that? That's the kind of positive action you'd see from me as the Mayor. I don't know if you can see the people on that side behind the plant.
Probably don't need a mic. Shaun, I'm Andy Keane-Downs from PACT, Prison Advice and Care Trust. I totally recognise so much of what you say, and thank you for that. So 2 questions for me, because I'm greedy. First of all, I would like to invite you to come and see what we're doing at Brixton Prison. We've got a programme called Routes to Change, and it's all about how we can support guys to think about their responsibilities as family men, responsibilities to their kids so that they don't end up in prison following their footsteps, responsibility to their mums, and how we can support those families who are the collateral damage of our broken system, as you very eloquently pointed out. Second question, well, real question, but I hope you'll come. Second question, would you be interested in following the Greater Manchester model around devolution of criminal justice systems? Because it seems to me that if we continue with the way we are in terms of how we build and fill up prisons and the reoffending rate that we've got, we're not going to get our way out of the problem for London, because the reoffending rate from prisons in London is way too high. So as part of a wider strategy, would you be interested in taking over control of the justice system?
So let me answer your first question first. Yes, I will come, but I'll tell you why I will come. One of the interesting things of running for Mayor of London, you quickly find out how many very good people there are in London. There is no challenge you face in London that people haven't done some very deep thinking about, and it just speeds up the whole process. I've deliberately slowed the process of delivering my manifesto just so I could learn from people like you, so I absolutely will come. When it comes to criminal justice, so the part of me that is actually a Conservative is a little bit nervous about making the bureaucracy that is City Hall any bigger than it needs to be. But I will say this, when I was at number 10, one of the things I was really fond of was intelligent tagging. Because I wore a tag for a week to see if the technology worked and to discuss it with my boys, because my boys are criminal experts, unfortunately. And I remember one of them saying to me something so profound, I've never forgot it. He said it would work to tag in the intelligent, because crime needs privacy. And he said, if you can break that privacy, then you have a chance of breaking the cycle. So, and you can only really do things effectively like that at a regional level. So I think the pledge I would make is to do the research to see how it would actually work. Because sometimes when you grow a bureaucracy, you just lose everybody between the cracks. But I am very interested in that, because I do know, I made a comment about youth culture. Much youth culture on the street is driven by prison. It's a real prison culture. And when you place children in jail, what you do, you take them from a GCSE in crime straight to PhD in crime. And that's a punishment for us all. I had someone say something to me the other day, really important. She said to me, we must punish with our heads, not our hearts. So we must punish relative to what a person's done, always with the idea to rehabilitate them, so we don't have to continually deal with them as they go further and further into the system. And I think that's very important. And if somebody could demonstrate to me that having that in London, in our control, and I'm warm to the idea, would make things better, then I'd certainly do it.
So, hi Shaun, Ross Lyle, Evening Standard. Can I just ask you to expand a bit on the Operation London ceasefire plan? How many police officers would it involve? Which boroughs would you target? How long would it run for, and so on, please? Because it sounds a little bit as well like the violence reduction unit that Sadiq already has up and running and is recently taken to cover from Glasgow.
So let me give you the differences first. The violence reduction unit is a tragic missed opportunity. I asked the mayor a question. Remember, this is a unit that's got £6.8 million. I asked the mayor a question, what are they going to do with it? He said, I don't know, they haven't figured it out again. The difference between me and the mayor, I do know what I would do with that money. That's you cannot give somebody £6 million and tell them figure it out. That's simply nonsense. And what it means is you get another silo rather than a cohesive approach to dealing with crime. That's the first thing. The second thing, the violence reduction, the other missed opportunities, it shouldn't be in City Hall. If you do have a VRU, it should be outside of City Hall, independent, because City Hall in and of itself is the authorities. And much of the conversation you have to have, the authorities can't have. I've had conversations with many young people, including yesterday. The council shouldn't and couldn't have that conversation. You won't get the realness. There is so many well set up organisations in London that could have made much better use of the money. We'd have got more bang for our buck. We'd have got more local work done as well. And if MOPAC is to justify its size, it should have just administered the budget, not started something new. Again, a tragic waste of money. The huge salaries they're paying, you ask anybody who does face-to-face work, they'll tell you what they could have done with that money. That's the missed opportunity. The difference is, let's be clear, I am not in the business of reinventing the wheel. I don't believe any political persuasion, party or belief has a monopoly on common sense. So if you have a good idea, let me know. This good idea comes from Boston. It was called the Boston Miracle. They did a similar thing in Glasgow, where they brought the gangs in and said, it's us versus you. And in the context of London, if I'm mayor, that'll be a record amount of police. So a record amount of police versus you. What do you want to do, Holmes? What do you want to do? And if you want to do this, let's figure out how it's going to be. You go the right way, and I'll support you to do that. So when you ask me how long it's going to go, it will just keep going. It will just keep going until the police say to me they've got it down to small enough numbers to think about a different type of intervention. That's the first thing. You don't, crime is like the weather. You know, you can't plan for a picnic, especially in England. You never know when it's going to rain. You just got to keep going. You've got to buy an umbrella. And now this is the umbrella, to just keep going until you get to a real reduction. That is why I told you 250 recognised gangs by the police. I'll have a negotiation with the police. When do you think that number is low enough to change this intervention? That's the first thing. The second thing is, what's good about this, it isn't just me setting up something new, it's me setting up the arena to use the work we already have. So when I say to people, you do work that speak there, I forget the project, they meet, it's run by the police, they meet young people in the custody suite in that very, very teachable moment. Yeah? I will support that work, I will make it part of what we're doing. Because the idea that you start something new without attaching it to what goes on does two things. It robs the good work we have of any idea it will get funds into the future, and it just starts another bureaucracy. And I don't want to be in a conversation about saving money, I'm only interested in saving lives.
So my question is just quite straightforward. Where would you be looking to get the extra funding to put on this programme that you're talking about here?
Wonderfully. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, hi, I'm Debbie from Bounce Back. So we're a charity, we work in prisons and we also work in the community. And the programme was Divert, so we work with the Met Police on the Divert programme as well. And mine was just more of a statement just around, absolutely agree with everything you've said. We need to stop putting the sticking plaster on these things and we need to address root causes. And going back to your point, we had 2 young men down with us yesterday at our centre in Victoria, and I spoke to them, and they said exactly what you've just said, that all they're looking for is something to do, looking for opportunity, there's no aspiration. And they worked their little socks off yesterday, and they're back with us today. So, and, you know, we'll help them, we'll get them trained, and we'll get them into employment. So just, yeah.
It's spot on. And just to answer your technical question, let's be clear, the money is there. The VRU has £6.8 million. They were just given an additional £7 million by central government. When I use the words missed opportunity, that's what I mean. We are having political arguments. People saying, well, it's your fault. Look at the report I've just written. The money is there. Take the action. If I do nothing else, I just want to force people to take the action. The only thing you can do wrong at this point is continue to do what we're already doing. We have to change tack.
You talk about like better supporting or equipping police officers. How do you actually envisage that happening or looking like?
So the other end of this intervention is we have, my colleagues and I usefully found £76 million, £86 million to get extra additional police in. So first and foremost, you just get police bodies. You need bodies to do this. 800 of those, by the way, detectives. That's the first step. The second step is you buy the technology. And let's be clear, I'm not interested in saving any money. That is not my goal. The only reason you hear me talk about saving money is about an efficiency. So I will buy the technology because it frees police time up to be police officers. For instance, if you take CCTV, we should be using the same technology that the New York police use to go through it, so we don't have to have our officers sat down going through hours and hours of CCTV. That just wastes their time, whereas the computer does it quickly and better. So that's the first thing, investing in the police to buy these things physically to make things better. Scan and search as opposed to stop and search, but also investing in the community. I was at the event for the recognition of those who died in the slave trade, UNESCO event at City Hall, and as you can imagine, a lot of people from the black community turned up, and a woman took me to the side and took me to task. She says, all very well you talking about more police, more stop and search, but what does that mean for our community? So that other end of that conversation is backing the police, supervising them so that they feel like they can do their job, but they do it in concert with the community. The conversation I had yesterday about the police's head being down, we need to raise that head up. That's why you hear me talk about a police covenant. So when you talk about resourcing the police, in my mind, that's right from morale to, new shoes. better shoes to walk around in, the commissioning system that the Met Police use is terrible. The Mayor has not asked the police to deliver any efficiencies, and that isn't my opinion. Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary said they're not spending the money efficiently. I would change that, because for me, that's people's life chances being wasted. For other people, it's an accounting error. For me, it's life chances. So I will be buying the equipment, I'll be supporting the police, and I'll be training them as well. The police recently spent £10 million finding out the colour of their personality. I don't actually know what that means. I went on a raid with a police officer. I asked him. He said, I don't know what that means, Shaun. That's the kind of thing I'm trying to get. It's a huge waste of money. I would have spent that money on training the police how to better integrate in diverse communities, or how to give better evidence at court so more criminals get caught. There is not words in the English vocabulary to convey to me the contempt I have for what's happened up until now, and that's why I'm desperate to change it. The only reason I'm bothering running for mayor is because I don't see the current actions being realistic or sustainable if London's going to keep safe.
Hello, I'm Eliza Ribeiro, the CEO of Livestock Knives. My question is, we haven't received funding from the Mayor of London. What we do receive, though, is loads of queries from smaller charities asking us to help them, or to provide consultation, or to provide young people for their services. And these are smaller services in Croydon that don't have the young people there, or maybe aren't providing the same services, or need us to help them when we're not receiving the funds. What I want to know is how you are going to monitor and manage the programs that you are supporting, and to make sure that it's the right charities getting the funds for the 3 years.
Thank you for the question. First and foremost, I've run 2 small charities, youth work ones. I know that feeling. You've got those people they've got a bid writing team or something, or they've got some relationships. They get the money and you get the work. I've been there 100 times. It's why I make the comment about I don't need money for football kit and all that. I need money for people and to keep the building warm. I understand that. So there's 2 things I think. City Hall is a huge bureaucracy. There's a lot of people in that building, a whole load of people in that building, yeah? You use them to do as much of the admin and the follow-up work as possible. What is really horrific when you run a charity is that they'll give you £20,000 or £30,000 and you spend £15,000 of that doing the monitoring. Yeah, I'm going to try and get round that. How you find out who does the work is 2 ways you do it. One, you go down to those local areas. I happen to come from that background. I find it less of a problem to understand what's actually effective. It's why when we talk about the gang call-ins, I will sit in them. I will sit in the gang call-ins to make sure people are not coming there to raise money or waste people's time. They're coming to provide a solution. But ultimately, there's also organisations around London who have great coverage who you can go to help you do that piece of work. London Youth leaps to mind. They have over 400 members. Not only do they have a lot of members, but also they understand the notion of what it is to run a small charity. You can do that work. They can do that admin piece for you. Because my worry is that the money's being spread so wide for political reasons rather than for delivery reasons. Yeah. And I would say to people in the charitable sector as well, let's figure out who can work together to increase the effectiveness of whatever monies we have. Because when it comes to social issues, you could always spend more money. So we need to make sure that we do it effectively, the monies we have.
Hello, my name is Noel Williams. I'm a policy advisor at the Ministry of Justice. However, I know you well, Shaun, and I've seen you for years, and I know you're sincere. Like, when we was in 2015, we had a Conservative candidate in Camberwell, and you were saying the same things when we shared a cab back, do you know what I mean? So I know about how much this means to you. However, it's very hard to inspire, as me and you both know, the kids on the street, it's very hard to inspire these young people to make a decent change in their lives and get a break. Like you said about the Citibank, I was fortunate enough. I love that guy over there on his phone, Rory. I love him. I sat down with him. I met him. He put me in here for a year. He also made sure I had personal development stuff that he made sure I left with and said, you need to look at these things going forward in your life. I took that on board. I've looked at these things. I managed to get a 2-1 at university. I managed to go to university, get to university. However, he was able to look past a lot of stuff, maybe from his own personal experience of being a police officer, me obviously being a robber in my day, and we was able to band. How are you going to get a whole city full of 4,000 young people? Who from Citibank's taking these young people? When's other people of, you know, workplaces like this or universities where you don't need some sort of risk assessment? There's a lot of red tape in the middle of that. But me and you both know there's some transferable skills out there. There's some kids right now sitting in drug houses for the next 12 hours. They will outwork anybody in this room. And if you give them something positive to do, then it's going to be positive outworking. How are we going to get that going? Because all the campaigns I see from the mayor, it's a joke. And the last thing I'm going to say is, when we got things like chicken boxes coming out with slogans on top of them, that is culturally insensitive. People haven't thought about certain campaigns that they're pushing out. And we could have spent that money on saying, Barclays, this is the new thing, or, you know, why can't we get these young people in, give them a chance of tomorrow? How do we inspire a whole city of young people and business owners and whoever else to take on these young people so we don't have to still be on these estates or still be on these roads? Because when I go back to Tooting Broadway, I see people daily dying. If they're not dying, then they're struggling to push themselves out of that barrel. And I've just been lucky enough that I've met somebody who I now believe it's going to be great people to see past these things, great organisations. How do we inspire these organisations? How do I leave here lifting my head up to say, do you know what, this is the man I'm going to vote for, get everybody else to vote for, because the man right now is doing nothing. How do we inspire?
So, let me just say this. Firstly, the key thing you said is inspire. That's the key thing. Because I made a comment earlier on about the attractive nature of doing something else. Yeah, and that's why I also made the comment that nobody behaves for the council. It is about personal relationships. It is about organisations understanding how they can flex everything they have, money, people, location, to deliver for people. That's why you heard me say, what are you all going to do in it? I have some great friends sat in this room who run entire councils. They will be getting memos from me. Who are you employing locally? What different places are you looking for employees? I made the comment about poor careers advice. That is a national pastime. We will break it here. One of the good things I have been to that City Hall sponsors is they do the apprenticeship fair. I would do them regularly all day long. The reason that I took the question from a young lady, that's such a strong question, is because we have to get right down in communities. That's why I won't be just funding the usual suspects. I will be funding people at the front door who are in these places where people cannot go to. A friend of mine called Huggy, he runs a little basketball thing. Yeah, it's just him and 12 kids. Yeah, but he runs the 12 kids that locally everybody needs him to deal with. How do we find him? How do we support him? How do we make sure that he's doing admin, he's doing face-to-face work? How do we disseminate that information? All I'm trying to do is replicate what I did when I ran my charity across the whole of London. That's why you always hear me talk about two things in particular: employment and parents. And then when you have parents, you go beyond that. The word community is overused. But what are communities built on? Largely parents, just because of the age range they possess. They're normally the biggest breadwinners in any given community. How do we support them to give the messages over? The young man I spoke to yesterday, two things went through my mind. Oh my gosh, how can I help you? And oh my gosh, that's the kind of conversation middle-class families have all day, every day over the dinner table. He took me for a story where he didn't realise he's going to have come up with such a massive deposit for rent. Any of you in here would have told your children that first. 101, have you got a deposit? Do you see what I mean? So what it is, it's about culture. It's about effectiveness. That's why you won't hear me talk about saving money. You'll hear me talk about where do we spend it correctly. And when you talk about getting right down and inspiring, we've got to change the mood music. Again, 10 years to solve knife crime. The boys I roll around with them, oh boy, man better tool up if nothing's going to happen for 10 years. I need to survive those 10 years. And I say this to you again, if you run any type of organisation, you have to think about how you get your human capital out onto the streets of London. My mentor, much like yours, looks nothing like me. Been life-changing for me. One man called Lord Nash. Been life-changing for me. How do we replicate that? When I talk about parents, let me be clear, I'm talking about adults in a community. I spent my whole time, my whole professional career, until I got involved in party politics, mentoring to young people and not giving of my pain, not telling them what I was upset about, trying to help them get over what they were upset about. That's the kind of things we have to do. So when I talk to you about the scattergun approach that leads to lots of nice press releases, that's what I'm not going to do. I'm going to put the money where it really, really works. That's what we have to do.
Time for one more question.
Hi Shaun, Jack Ellison from Mail Online. In your speech you mentioned that over the past 10 years crime in London has really worsened, and I just one person you didn't mention was obviously Sadiq Khan. How much of that do you blame on the current mayor, and therefore within that same time window his predecessor and the current Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and then following up from central government and what the young gentleman said at the back, do you believe that putting out anti-knife propaganda on chicken boxes was, as he said, culturally insensitive?
Gosh, where should I start? So let me start with the current mayor. Look, it would be easy for me to stand here and slate the mayor. I have a few friends in this room, we would absolutely love that. We'd go to the pub after this and be really happy about that. But that's not my job. I don't want... I often tell people that I'm not a politician. I've accidentally ended up in politics. I think that is political behaviour, and then what it does is what I call jazz hands politics. I wave my hands hard enough and you don't actually look at the problem. So let's be clear. Sadiq Khan is not out there causing crime, but what he has done is avoid the responsibility to answer for it. If you want to use the name of Boris Johnson, let's be clear. When he became mayor, there was a huge crime problem and he got involved. He got involved. He solved it. Somebody said to me the other day, aren't you in trouble, Shaun, because Boris has now promised Britain 20,000 police officers? Doesn't that make Sadiq right? And I said no, because when I spoke to Boris, he said, Sadiq isn't going to do it, so I'm going to have to do it again. That's where we are. Take responsibility. Get on with it. Do something. The only thing you can do wrong now is to continue what we are doing. That much I know. It's been tried, it's been tested, and it's failed. Let's move on. What's your other question?
What the gentleman said, sorry. Thanks. What the gentleman said at the back about chicken boxes and how putting anti-knife propaganda on chicken boxes, was that culturally insensitive?
Listen, I personally feel a lot of people weren't entirely a hold of the facts when they complained about the chicken boxes. So what happened was you had a business who looks into their daily customer base and thinks, wow, we have lots of young people in here, we want to help, let's do this. You then have a civil service, and let's be clear, the Home Office is the most terrible part of the civil service. They have made hundreds of mistakes and continue to do that. Right, let's just not mention the word Windrush, for instance. I asked for the permanent secretary to go on the back of that. And they somehow made it insensitive. Because I spoke to a kid, right, who isn't in the demographic, certainly racially, that people are saying that as directed at. And he said, but Shaun, everyone from school goes to the shop afterwards. I want to know about it. I want to read it. What's going on? And if you deal with young people, what's really interesting to young people is other young people. They want to know what their peers are going through. We all know it. Anybody in here who's got children will tell you, your children are not interested in you until it comes to payment time. And so the idea that you try to talk to young people, I get it. For my man at the back says culturally insensitive, I kind of know where he's going, but what else? What else? How else do you get these messages across? You've got to meet people where they are. I liken it to employment. When I speak to a lot of city firms, they say, but nobody applies to us from your community, Shaun, because you always look in the same place. You look where nobody from our community can ever be. Look for people where they are, and then you'll get a change. And that, I think that was a ill-managed attempt, but an attempt to change where they're placing the message.
Brilliant. Thank you. I'm going to get us all out before the fire alarm gets us all out.
Can I just finish by saying, look, thank you so much for attending and engaging. And my hope around this issue in particular, around employment, supporting families, all the rest of that, this has got to be beyond politics. If we're ever going to solve our poverty and crime issues in London, we've got to come together and get it done. So any input that you have, my team will gladly receive it. Thank you.
For those of you who don't know so well, please do come back. We always say we're neutral about who's mayor, we're neutral about who's prime minister, but we're not neutral about knife crime, we're not neutral about people referral units, we're not neutral about families, we're not neutral about employment, and all these issues that have been raised. So please keep in touch, be a friend, we'll hopefully see you at the next event.
Sure, that's great. Thank you. Should we arrange a visit? Let's do it. You got a card.